welcome to the People for It Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Carol Parker Walsh. As an expert in transformational leadership and human development, and the creator of People for It Leadership, I'm here to help you create thriving, engaged teams and unstoppable leaders. In each episode, we'll explore the strategies and insights that will elevate your leadership impact and drive lasting results. Get ready for a transformative journey filled with actionable steps. Let's go. Hello. Welcome back to the People for It Leadership Podcast. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here with me. Today, we're diving into something that's become an important but misunderstood concept in leadership, and that's psychological safety. Now, in case you're thinking, listen, I've heard this one before, I want you to stay with me because the conversation we're having today is really about what's at stake in today's climate and the future of work for you and your organization. Right now, according to recent data, trust in senior leadership has fallen sharply since the pandemic. Glassdoor is reporting that distrust is up 26% year over year, and misalignment between employees and leadership is up by 149%. And we're seeing what some are calling the great detachment, quote unquote. And while employees aren't quitting in large numbers like they did at the great exit and great resignation, like they've done in the past, they're not fully engaged either. They're showing up, but they're checked out. They're present, but they're being very protective and guarding themselves because they're not sure if they're even going to stick around. And in this climate of rolling layoffs, economic uncertainty, and constant change, people are often running a very specific calculation in their minds. They're asking themselves, is it safe to be here? Is it safe to tell the truth here? Is it safe for me to take risks, to grow, to be myself? And if the answer is no, they don't necessarily quit, but they will stop contributing their best. And that's what psychological safety is really about, which is what we're going to talk about. But before we get into all that, I want to start with what it actually means, because I know there's really a lot of confusion about this. I've talked to a lot of leaders or other individuals, and people have different ideas of what psychological safety actually is. Now, I'm certified in Dr. Amy Edmondson's work on psychological safety, so I tend to lean in that direction and with her definition, and here's how she puts it. Psychological safety is a shared belief that this is a place where it's safe to speak up, take interpersonal risks, and be human without fear of embarrassment, punishment, or quiet retaliation. Now, I want you to notice what's not in the definition. It's not about being comfortable all the time. It's not about avoiding conflict. It's not about lowering your standards. And it's not even about being nice. In fact, psychological safety should enable you to have the harder, more difficult conversations that you need to have in the workplace. And here's how I like to think about it in everyday terms. Psychological safety shows up in the small moments. The small moments like, can I admit that I made a mistake without rehearsing that conversation 10 times over in my head first? Can I take ownership of my work without my boss micromanaging me or critiquing me every step of the way? Can I disagree with my leader or a popular colleague without paying the price for it later? Can I say, listen, I don't know, or raise my hand and say, I need help? Or let people know I'm at capacity and I can't take on anymore without being labeled weak or difficult or not leadership material. When the answer is yes to those type of questions, people don't waste energy protecting themselves. They spend the necessary energy to solve your biggest problems in the workplace, to serve your customers, be innovative, and to support each other. Now, I often get asked, what's the difference between trust and psychological safety? And in many ways, they're two sides of the same coin. But here's how I put it. Trust is often experienced at the individual level, right? I'll say things like, I trust you. But psychological safety is experienced at the team and the cultural level. It's safe to be myself and to take risks in this place. This is how we do things around here, right? It's a bigger concept as opposed to an individualized concept, but they're both very closely connected. You can trust a colleague one-on-one and still feel like the broader system, the broader organizational culture isn't safe. And People for It leaders pay attention to both levels of that. For those of you who've been following this podcast, you know I talk about the People for It leadership framework all the time. I talk about the 3 pillars of leader awareness, empowered ecosystems, and adaptive continuous learning. And psychological safety, while it definitely rubs against all of the pillars, it sits primarily in the 3rd pillar of adaptive continuous learning. And here's why. You can't have an adaptive, resilient learning culture without safety, period. I mean, think about it. You can't run after action reviews if people are afraid to say what really happened. You can't learn from failure if the goal is to make sure no one ever attaches your name to it. You can't build resilience with a team that spends all day self-editing, self-protecting, and being performatively nice. Think of psychological safety as the soil, right? And adaptive continuous learning is what grows from that soil. Experimentation, reflection, feedback loops, innovation, this all grows out of that. And trust is the felt experience that people have when they're standing in that soil every day. And without a healthy soil, nothing grows. Your strategies don't take root. Your change initiatives wither. Your best people eventually leave to find better ground someplace else. Or worse, you create an environment of toxic positivity where people smile and nod and say all the right things, but underneath they're terrified to tell you the truth. The soil looks green on the surface, but nothing really grows. But what does happen is problems fester, resentment builds, and as the leader, you're the last to know that something's wrong. Now, one of the top management consulting firms in the world, Boston Consulting Group, did a study of 28,000 employees across 16 countries, and they found that when psychological safety is low, people don't feel safe. 12% of employees are at risk of quitting within the year. But when it's high, when psychological safety is high, the number lowers by only 3%. And people are often leaving for different reasons other than the lack of safety or trust in the workplace. Employees with high psychological safety report feeling 2 times more motivated, 2.7 times happier, 3.3 times more enabled to reach their full potential. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough, and that's the impact that psychological safety has that is even more pronounced for women, people of color, LGBTQ plus employees, and people with disabilities. For these groups, when there's high psychological safety, it increases retention by 4 to 6 times. Other research shows a 27% reduction in turnover, 76% more engagement, and 50% more productivity in psychologically safe environments. So we see that it matters. It makes an impact. And as we look at the landscape of work and how it's changing and what people are demanding in the workplace, that their humanity, that their well-being, that their ambitions, that their purpose is being satisfied, it is so important that these numbers are paid attention to, that the feeling and the culture of the organization around safety and trust are being paid attention to. But here's the thing, only about 26% of leaders even see psychological safety as part of their leadership responsibilities. It's just not on their radar, or it's an afterthought. I mean, I know there's so many other responsibilities that leaders need to focus on that this feels like one more thing added to the plate. But as you can see by these numbers, it's highly impactful. So it's no surprise that only half of workers say their managers are doing it well when leaders aren't seeing it as a priority on their agenda. And this is where trust erodes, innovation goes to die, and performance quietly flatlines. Now, remember when I mentioned toxic positivity a minute ago? I want to dig into that a bit more because this is the version of broken psychological safety that's the hardest to spot. And I see it all the time in my work. And here's, kind of what it looks like. I've worked with organizations where on the surface, everything looks fine. People are smiling, meetings are pleasant. There's a lot of superficial conversations, a lot of head nodding, and a lot of, no, everybody's great here. And we all get along great here. It's almost like people are programmed to say it's all good. But underneath, people are terrified to give real feedback. They're afraid to critique each other because they know that they'll be seen as negative or not a team player or difficult. There's a lot of triangulation where people are talking around each other instead of directly to each other. And disrespectful things get said, but never addressed. Instead, they're swept under the rug because pointing out bad behavior is not what you want to do. It breaks the facade of everyone's happy here. And there's this thin veil of safety, but actually there's no safety at all. And everyone is feigning positivity while the real issues fester. And let me tell you, this is incredibly hard to unwind. I've worked with one organization for 3 years, and we finally seen a significant increase in psychological safety. But it took that long because, as we know intuitively, once trust is gone, it takes a lot of time, commitment, and practice to rebuild it and get it back again. Trust is the foundation of safety, and you can't build on a cracked foundation. So if you're leading an organization where everything seems positive, but no one is really speaking up, that's a potential red flag. That's not safety. That's silence wearing a smile. So as a leader, what can you do about it? Well, I want to give you 3 practical shifts that you can really start thinking about and start implementing right away. The first is you want to move from performative openness to structured voice. And this is what I mean by it. It's not enough to tell people they can speak up. You have to create routines and rhythms that make speaking up a normal part of how things work, not something that requires an act of courage. Many leaders tell me, listen, my door is always open. And they mean it. They genuinely believe people will come to them with any issues. But here's what I see over and over again. No one walks through the door, and it's not because they don't have anything to say, but because they already know what's going to happen if they do. They'll be challenged, they'll be ignored, they'll be minimized, or maybe just told that what they're thinking isn't really right and they need to think about what they're doing and not bring up any issues because after all, everything is going well. Or it just won't be well received. So they stop trying. And the leader looks at that empty doorway and thinks, hey, everything's fine because no one's coming to me with problems. So it creates this really damaging loop. There's not openness, and instead there's a false sense of security in the mind of the leader because they think everyone is fine because people are afraid to bring things up knowing that nothing's going to be done about it. So what does real openness look like? Well, you have to build the structure for it to live. And you can do this by starting your meetings with a quick round where everyone shares a win and a worry. Not just wins that can feed that toxic positivity that I talked about, but also the worries. You can normalize it by saying something like, here's something I'm wrestling with, or here's where I got it wrong and what I decided to do about it. Anyone else have an event or an issue like that? Ask questions that invite honesty. And one of my favorites is, what's one thing we're not talking about that we probably should be talking about? And then actually sit there and listen for whatever comes up. And listen, if no one shares, you throw something out there to get the ball rolling. And in your one-on-ones, don't just ask people, hey, how's it going? How are you? That question usually triggers people to answer on autopilot. Everything's fine, right? Instead, try something like, what feels risky for you to tell me right now? And then sit there in silence. Don't rush it. Let them think and let them decide if there's enough trust for them to answer you honestly. Building this type of structure signals to your team that their voice is not an interruption, but that is part of how we operate here. Now, the second shift you can make is to normalize smart risk-taking and reframing failure. If you say, we want innovation, but you only reward perfection, your people will get the message. In an adaptive culture, failure is data. So share your own recent missteps and what you've learned from it. When someone tries something new and it doesn't work, debrief it publicly. You can say, here's what we tested, what we learned, and what we'll adjust next time. Shift the question from who caused this to where did our system or our assumptions break down? And what can we learn from this for the next time? Giving the implication that, yes, people, there will be a next time. When you do this consistently, people stop hiding their problems and they start bringing them to you early while they're still fixable. The third shift is what I call close the loop. One of the fastest ways you can destroy psychological safety is to ask for input and then do nothing with it. Or worse, to quietly punish the person who spoke up and gave you the input you just asked for. Listen, you don't have to say yes to every request. You probably won't be able to. But regardless of whether you can or can't, you must close the loop. Honesty and transparency are the hallmarks of psychological safety. And it doesn't have to be complicated. You can say something like, listen, here's what I heard. Here's what we're going to act on now. Here's what I'll revisit later. And here's what we can't change. And this is why we can't change it. And here's how I'm going to show up in the next 30 or 60 days so that you can see what I'm working on and the progress so that you know I'm making a difference and taking your input seriously. Closing the loop is how psychological safety and adaptive continuous learning actually connect. And that way people see their voices as a way to create movement. So they'll use their voice more. They'll speak up. They'll share more so that you can really have a pulse on what's happening on your team and within your organization. Well, they don't think that their voice is just noise in the wind that's not going to be listened to, and they actually think it's something that can make movement and create impact, then you'll get more input to know what's happening so that you can make a difference and make the necessary changes that you need to make. Now, before I wrap up, I want to leave you with just a few questions to sit with. You don't have to answer all of them. Just pick the one that resonates with you. How does your team learn about bad news? Does it surface early or only when it can't be hidden anymore? Whose voice have you really heard from in the last 30 days? And the big one, if you ask your team, is it safe here to take smart risks, to say, I don't know, or to push back? What would they say when you're not in the room? Here's what I want you to take away from today's episode. Psychological safety isn't about lowering standards. It's actually about raising relational and learning standards so your people can actually meet the demands that you're facing today. You can't build a future-ready culture on fear, and you can't learn faster than your competitors if your people are afraid to tell you what's really going on. But the good news is you have more influence over this than you think. Every time you listen without defensiveness, admit a mistake, or close the loop on feedback, you're rewiring what normal feels like in your culture. And that's psychological safety. That's authentic trust. And that's how your organization stops talking about being adaptive and actually becomes it. Now, if you want to go deeper, I've created a leader's guide to psychological safety, which is an introductory practical blueprint for this work. And I'll drop a link in the show notes so you can grab it. And as usual, if you found value in this episode, go ahead and leave a 5-star rating and review for the show and share it with another leader you feel can use this. It helps other People for It leaders find us. And until next time, I want to thank you for joining me and keep leading people forward. I'll see you soon. Thanks for tuning in to the People for It Leadership Podcast. If you're ready to implement the insights and strategies shared in today's episode, schedule a call with our team to explore how we can help you drive talent retention, boost engagement, and develop extraordinary People for It leaders in your organization. Plus, be sure to visit our website to access additional resources that will support your growth goals. Until next time, keep leading your people with purpose and confidence. And remember, when your people thrive, organizational success is inevitable.